Welcome back to Acreage Adventures, where today I'm building a backyard rink. Now, full disclosure, I have built this rink before, so it's not a bottom-up build, but I think you'll still enjoy it. Also, if you really want to see a video where I go into really deep details on how to build this, let me know in the comments and I'll think about doing a how-to video. On to the actual build. The first step for us is to simply bring out all the boards. The rink is made out of 1/2-inch OSB sheets and 2x4 braces. As I mentioned, this isn't their first season, so they've already been cut to size and stained white. So our first step is just to simply get them out of storage and put them roughly into place. Thankfully, this process doesn't take too long, and a pair of 10-year-old boys are now strong enough to carry at least the sheets that we've cut down to 2 feet wide. In addition to the boards, we also have 4 planter boxes. They were originally for hanging lights at my sister's wedding, but they found new life in reinforcing our rink and as a way to hang our floodlights and hold the netting up. The first few years I did a backyard rink, I didn't do lights or netting. The kids were young, the rink was smaller, and we got just enough light off the back of our house to make it work. Now they're a necessity. In our part of the world, we get really long summer days, but really short winter ones. And when it's dark before 5 p.m., you won't get much use out of this rink without lights. Also last year, I finally took the step of adding netting. For a long time, I got away with just boards, but as the boys have grown and their shots have improved, we started losing a lot of pucks over the net. Last year, it took me a while to order and get the net up, so this spring I found 27 pucks in the yard. I usually set up our boards in about the middle of October, so mid-project we needed to take a little break and set up our Halloween blow-ups. It was actually well above seasonal this fall in Alberta, so it looks like a really nice day as we're building these boards. You'll see that I start out with a sweater on, but after doing just a little bit of manual effort in the sunshine, that thing had to come off. Also, a lot of people ask me about how the rink affects the grass. In this case, it definitely looks like I'm putting the boards on really early in the fall, and it would probably be harming the grass. However, it's later than it looks, and in my experience, covering up the grass this late doesn't really harm it. It's almost gone dormant on its own at this point, and instead of killing it, if you cover it at this time of the year, you just help it go dormant quicker. Of course, in the spring, the grass in this area recovers slower because it's still covered in ice a couple weeks after most of the snow is melted, but I've never had it actually die from the rink. Just dormant, and maybe a little slower start in the spring. Something you might notice as I'm screwing the boards together is each brace is going right on a seam between 2 boards, and there isn't a brace mid-sheet. When I first designed this, I definitely considered adding a mid-sheet brace, and I'm sure it would add support, but it's not necessary. Simply attaching them on the seams works perfectly fine for me. After the boards are up, we patiently wait for colder temperatures before bringing out the liner. This year I'm attempting to reuse the previous year's liner, so it's not as pretty, and you'll see that we're preemptively trying to patch any holes that could be under the water level. For me, I simply use a staple gun to hold the liner in place, but I know other rink builders use clamps. I'm okay with staples because the staple point is way above my water level because I'm having pretty high boards. But if you're going for a skating rink or you're going to have lower boards, you'll definitely want clamps. For the rest of this video, this is a great example of do as I say and not as I do, because my approach is not, quote, best practice. If you're trying to build a rink like this with a liner, you typically want to use clamps and then fill to the desired level in a single shot. Then once the water is in, you may need to loosen some clamps so the liner has enough slack to fill in right against the boards. When the water truck comes later, you'll see me doing this with the end boards and my staples. Any tension in the liner will effectively create a gap below that ice and then can cause issues. For me, however, I'm impatient, and I know I can probably get the ice done a week or 2 sooner if I take the approach you're about to see. The price for this extra week, though, is probably 20 extra hours of work and frequent frustration, so I don't recommend it, especially if you're new to this. However, it's what I did this year, so it's what you're about to see. The corner closest to the camera is probably about 10 inches deep, so it helps to get a head start on it. If I waited to do a single fill, I'd have to wait until we get a stretch of really cold temperatures, probably at least 3 or 4 days where the lows are minus 10 Celsius or lower, in the teens if you're an American. This year in particular, we had a very mild November though, so I never had a chance to make that one big fill. I won't bore you with tons and tons of footage of a garden hose filling the rink, but just enough that you get the idea here. The reason it's not best practice to do layers is that you freeze the ice and then run more water. You'll occasionally break that ice loose, and when it pulls away from the liner, it can rip, or the mini icebergs floating around can also run into the liner and make small holes. In either case, you're really taking your chances with holes if you go this route. Okay, we've built a base, but by the time we did that, it got cold enough to call in the water truck. This part, however, is my favorite as it makes so much progress so fast. This particular truck carries 6.5 cubes of water, and we get that all on the rink in about 30 minutes. While this is happening, you'll also see that I'm having to release some tension in the liner on that back wall. Unfortunately, I didn't notice it until later, but I should have also done that along the short boards on the left side of this video too. I'll get to it later, but I would have been way better off if I'd caught it here. After the water truck, we're actually in pretty good shape. It froze quite well, but when I went to check on it, I did have a bit of what's called shell ice. This can happen for various reasons, but in my case, it's definitely because we got a small leak. The reason that creates shell ice is that the ice freezes from the top down, and that surface layer starts to freeze, but after a while, the water slowly leaks out underneath of it and leaves a hollow section before the lower water starts to freeze too. Anyway, it's obviously not good for skating on. What I do to fix this is simply walk all over it to break it up, and then add small layers of ice on top of it until the surface is smooth. You'll also note, however, that when I do this, I use a bucket. If you leave a hose on the surface, running that water will eventually erode your ice and make a big hole where you left it. We don't want a deep hole to deal with, so we pool the water in the bucket and then every 7 minutes go back out and dump it in the areas we need. Again, most rink builders don't want to be in this situation, which is why they get it flatter than I did, wait until it's really cold, and then fill it in one shot. I've been doing this for a decade, so I know all these little tricks and can deal with the consequences of being impatient. But again, if you're new to this, just take the easy route. One of the small advantages of layers, though, is that it is a lot easier to do lines. Here I know that I'll be bringing the water truck one more time and probably adding something like 2 inches of ice on top of the current level, so I might as well put some tape down, freeze it down with a thin layer over top, and then once we bring in the next load, it'll have that perfect just under the ice look. Before I can get that second water truck in though, I want to try and address the leak. So you're going to see me in the far corner with tape and a new liner, just trying to cover up wherever that leak was so that we don't get shell ice after this next pour. This more or less works, but unfortunately the water truck driver showed up early for the second pour, so we don't get to see it. With a solid surface underneath us, you'll see that the boys are finally skating. I have a bit more work to do in adjusting the lights and installing some netting on each end. Hopefully that means I don't have to buy any more pucks this year. Anyway, that's the rink. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, or even checking out a couple of our other videos.
Wow, that's crazy!